Welcome to another episode of WHU Inside Business. I'm your host today, Niklas Wittig, and today I'm joined by Mr. Mehul Shah. Mehul's career started at HP Labs in 2004, where he worked as a research scientist for 7 years. Following this, Mehul founded Amiato, a real-time data movement and data transformation cloud service. As CEO, Mehul was involved in all aspects of getting the business off the ground, and once it was, led the M&A process for its successful acquisition by Amazon in 2014. Where he would work as director and general manager of several analytics services at AWS. After Amazon, Mehul joined Google as their VP of engineering for streaming and data lake analytics services in Google Cloud. As of this July 2022, Mehul went back to his roots as a business founder, founding Aryn.ai, where he is using his extensive industry knowledge to innovate further in the data and cloud space. Mehul, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Niklas.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, not just anyone has the courage and ambition and drive to start a business from the ground up. You not only successfully founded one in the past, but after working in Silicon Valley at Amazon and Google in the corporate world for several years, you decided to go back to founding another business. How do you identify innovation opportunities and opportunities for innovative products?
Wow, what a great question. Certainly, you can innovate in a lot of different spaces, in a lot of different places. You can innovate in big companies. You can innovate while you're at universities. There's just a lot of places where innovation actually does happen. But the kind of innovation that I think is worth doing at a startup, at a new venture, is the kind that is special or personal to you. I actually like what one of the greats in Silicon Valley, Peter Thiel, likes to say. I'm going to paraphrase him a little bit. I don't remember the exact quote, but what he asks is, what is it that you know in this world to be true that most others do not believe, right? And it's a very hard question to answer. If you take a think about that statement or that question. If you think about that question is really about something that's personal to you. Like, what do you know that is true in this world? Something about, the way you do things on an everyday basis, the way other people do things on an everyday basis, the way the world works in a particular way that you think you need to fix. That only you seem to know, meaning you or a few people around you believe it's a problem that really needs to be fixed. And if there's a ton of other people that are doing, think the same thing, then you're going to have a very crowded space, right? A very hard time kind of innovating and sort of differentiating yourself from everybody else. On the other hand, if you have something that is very specific to you that you believe that you're really passionate about, but others aren't able to actually, see it, that's exactly the kind of thing that requires a venture, right? A big company just won't invest in it. Universities won't focus on it. If everybody else feels like that this is something that that's really not worth their time, you're going to be in an open space where you can really innovate and show people how to do things differently. And so those are the kinds of things that I think are worth doing as a startup. And every once in a while, you run into one of these things and you say, well, I don't know why the world doesn't work this way. And if you ask yourself that question a couple of times, maybe it's time for you to at least try out that thesis, try out that that assumption that, hey, maybe the world should work this other particular way, try to get there as quickly as possible. And that, my friend, is a startup. It's a venture.
And once you've found an opportunity worth pursuing, how do you take that opportunity and turn it into a business?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Honestly, it's people turn their ideas into businesses in many different ways. There's no right way, in my opinion, to go do this. The way that I've learned in the past to take an idea and turn it into business is to really just start working with customers. Working with the people that have the problems on a day-to-day basis, and ask them, see how they operate, see what they do on a daily basis, see where they're actually running into problems. Interview them, and then propose things to them. They're never going to know what the right solution is because should that solution actually be there, they would have built it themselves. But what you want to do is you want to work with them and propose things to them that might actually make things better for them, and then work as fast as you can to put a solution out there that they can try. And then once that works or gives them a certain small modicum of utility, you keep building on it. And it's really about putting something out there that's useful, getting feedback, and then iterating on it so that it becomes better and better over time. And the more iterations that you have, the faster that you iterate, and the more that you have customers that are passionate about using the products and the innovations that you're building, the more successful your business is going to be. This is what I learned at Amazon in particular. Amazon calls it the working backwards process from the customer. And that's really, I think, the essential part of it, like working backwards from a customer and what their needs are is the best way to turn your innovations into products that turn into large businesses over time.
Okay, so I want to focus in on an example, specifically at Amiato. As CEO, what was it like to scale a software product in such a competitive space?
Well, the honest truth is that one of the reasons that we got acquired, or why we went through an M&A process, is that we were unable, actually, to scale that product. And so my story is actually, unusual or perhaps different than many of the other stories that you hear about where somebody's gotten a successful M&A done. What we were able to do was put a great idea out there. Customers at that time, we were really having trouble doing analysis over their unstructured data, in particular their log data. And they were sort of manipulating these logs and massaging these logs and sort of their unstructured data by hand, and it was very tedious. So we had an idea. Our idea was that we would automatically take a look at the unstructured data, extract structure from it, using a bunch of algorithms. And now I think people would call it AI, but back then I think we just called them algorithms. And then extract that structure and then put it into a data warehouse so that you could analyze that data. And so our thesis was, hey, let's just go and look at any unstructured data, automatically, grab the structure out of it and put it into a data warehouse. And that actually proved to be too hard to do at the time. It was very hard to actually do that on a generic basis on any kind of unstructured data. So what we were able to do is work with some key customers and prove out that this was a very useful thing to do. We were able to work with these customers to prove out that it had provided them a lot of utility, that they were willing to pay good money for it, and that it helped their businesses to be able to analyze this data. But we were unable to scale the business. Every time we had a new customer, there was some slight modification that we had to make with the customer to be able to get them onto our platform. So this business just wasn't scaling as fast as we would like. And what we have found is where we were actually driving a lot of customers to AWS at the time, and in particular AWS's new data warehousing service called Amazon Redshift. And so that's how the marriage between AWS and Amiato was made, where they said, hey, why don't you come over here and help us kind of grow the Redshift business? And of course, your technology could be a key component of that overall ecosystem. So when we got to AWS, that's when I actually learned how to scale the business. And so this was my own sort of learning and evolution over the last, let's say, 10, 12 years. Getting to AWS, I learned very much how to make something easier for customers to use so that they could actually get on with working with the data by themselves rather than having to have us come in and help them all the time. And that's what turned into eventually what we call AWS Glue, which is Amazon's data transformation and data movement service, or data integration service at AWS now.
So it seems scaling was the big issue at Amiato.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you faced different challenges at Amazon during your tenure. If you could describe those issues to us and perhaps share insights for young professionals and business students now, what can they learn from those challenges that you faced?
So the challenges that we faced at Amazon were slightly different. So what I would say is scaling was always a problem. What we learned at Amazon was how to scale, right? What is it going to take so that when you have not just a few, like a handful of customers or dozens of customers, but you have thousands of customers coming, at a time, how do you actually, keep track of all of them? How do you make sure that the services are running, reliably for them? How do you make sure that every customer, regardless of whether it's a big multinational, retailer or bank versus a 5-person startup, how do you make sure that all of your customers are well taken care of? And making sure that those processes that take care of our customers are well automated and continue to improve over time, because at the end of the day, as your business and your services grow, you can't scale them linearly with the number of you can't scale the number of people linearly with the size of the business. So you're going as the business grows, you're going to have to figure out a way for every person to go further to handle more customers. And so that's what we learned how to do at AWS, which is in some ways even further scaling, but at just a different level of scale. We're not talking about dozens of customers anymore or hundreds of customers, but in the case of Glue, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of customers, and how to really handle their workloads.
So as a general manager, that was, you would say, your main priority, kind of extracting the most out of your team as the business grew, or what was the managerial aspect of it like at AWS, and perhaps how was it different from running a small startup like Amiato?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as a general manager, my responsibilities actually were, part of the responsibilities were making sure that the operations of the services that I managed were running well. Certainly I wasn't doing individually by myself. I had great people that were really surrounded me and helped me figure this stuff out. But there were sort of multiple responsibilities as a general manager. One, you had to make sure that operations were running well. Two, you had to continue to innovate. You had to continue to add new features, new capabilities into your products, create new products so that customers could do the next level of activities and get the next level of insights from their data. You also had to take all of this stuff to market. You had to work with the marketing team and the sales team to go and actually properly position and deliver the product in a way where other people can understand what it does and how to consume it. So as a general manager, my responsibilities actually spanned multiple dimensions, and I think that was the fun of it, right? That was really why I loved it so much. And the most important thing that I think I did as a general manager, beyond just building or organizing a team to build a business like this, was actually helping to build the team. Right? Certainly you're not going to be able to do this all by yourself. So how do you go and actually go and build these businesses? And the first thing you have to do is you just have to hire great people that can do these kinds of things. And if you can't, not only just hire great people, but you also have to assemble them, find their complements, find out how they can complement one another, and then grow those people into bigger and bigger roles. And so being able to go and actually do all of that at AWS was just really a great learning experience. I don't think it's actually that much different than being the CEO of a startup, and it's one of the reasons why I loved AWS so much. One of the things that I wrote in my farewell message, when I left AWS, was that Amazon is the world's greatest startup. It's one of the reasons why I stuck around there for so long. Being there for 8 years, we had an opportunity to create multiple new services and businesses there, and not too different from being part of a startup. So I really enjoyed it. There are, of course, technical differences, the way you fund these services, the rewards that you get, the kind of support that you have. These things are important. But at the end of the day, the thrill of putting a product out there and helping a customer, I think those two, and growing a business, I think those things were pretty much the same.
So zooming out here and just based on your experience in Silicon Valley, where would you say is innovation more likely to take place? Having experienced both sides of the coin, right? Starting a startup, leading to its successful M&A acquisition, then joining Amazon in the corporate world, a lot bigger firm. Where would you say is innovation more likely to take place?
Yeah, I don't think there's a dichotomy here that's worth setting up. I think innovation can actually take place in multiple places, depending, again, it just depends on what kind of innovation you're looking for. So there are certain types of innovation that is just really hard that are hard for Amazon and large organizations to do because they can't afford to take that kind of risk. And then there's other types of and so those kinds of innovations tend to be great, tend to happen in startups. There are other kinds of innovations that just require a tremendous amount of investment. And that's just harder to do as a startup because you need to go and collect a bunch of money investment from a lot of people. And maybe people aren't willing to take those kinds of risks. And this is where a place like AWS can really put in lots of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, to make a sort of a non-linear investment. And so it just depends, I think, on where you want to be, and the kind of innovation that you want to do. The thing that I would say is that I would try to get the innovation done in a big company, simply because the big company has so many more resources. It's sort of smoother sailing. Customers are more readily available, and at the end of the day, what matters is you're putting great products in front of customers. But sometimes companies don't see the value. As I said, it's a secret. In some ways, it's something that to be true about the world that most others don't believe. Even big companies, turn into that. So when, as an example, the Apple founders, Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, actually, showed HP, the computers that they were building, and HP didn't want to have anything to do with it. The founders of Google, Larry and Sergey, actually went to Yahoo and said, "We have this wonderful algorithm. Why don't you please buy it?" And all of the search engines didn't think that it was of any value, or enough value to buy that algorithm and implement it. And so you really want to go and do something that seems counterintuitive for most of these big companies. And so that kind of innovation, startup, but the things that seem intuitive but just require a lot of investment, big companies. The one thing that I would say that both big companies, startups, and wherever you want to go in terms of doing innovation, that they all share, is that you just need great, high judgment individuals, people. When you have people that are going to challenge you, when you have people that are going to push you hard into a direction that you didn't think, and people that are going to trust you and be committed with you into being on that journey, it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in a big company or whether you're in a startup. Just find those great people and just great things will happen. You need a place where the people are selfless. They kind of have to get rid of their ego, right? And they just have to be ready to kind of roll up their sleeves and get work done. So find smart people that are extremely passionate and hungry, and extremely humble. And I think the combination of those characteristics, you'll have innovation. It'll just fall out of the mixture that you put together there.
So to bring things full circle, Amiato gets acquired by Amazon. You have an extensive tenure there, working in Google briefly as well, but now you're back in the startup space, founding Aryn.ai.
Mm-hmm.
What brings you back there as a founder?
Exactly what I told you, right? I think at the end of the day, we have some thoughts about how we ought to be building search and data products in the cloud that don't seem to be materializing all that well on the various clouds. I've been at both AWS and at Google, and it's really not that much different at Microsoft and Azure. Certainly, all three of them are great places with phenomenal technologists, tremendous amount of investment, and really just great businesses and great places to work. But none of them really are investing in the kind of search technologies that we believe are going to take over the world. And so I thought, I should follow my passion and try to make it work. As I said, it's one of these things where I believe that there's something here that the world is going to be doing in the next few years, but most of these other places don't believe it. And so that's why I'm doing it as a startup.
I think as a business student myself, I can really resonate and learn from that. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Finally, our last question, a WHU Inside Business classic. What book can you recommend to our viewers that aligns with the knowledge that you've shared with us today?
There are a lot of books about startups out there, and it's really hard to just pick one. But the one book that has influenced at least that rings true with my experience at a startup is written by Ben Horowitz of Andreessen Horowitz fame. Ben Horowitz wrote a book called "The Hard Thing About Hard Things," and it, really what it describes are all the hard things that you have to do to get a company off the ground and make it successful. And it's really just unglamorous work. I know it feels spectacular at the end of the day when you have a great success with the business. And what you do is you tell a great story about how that success happened. But it's really about the everyday, everyday struggle, the everyday, day-to-day things that you have to do to just find the enthusiasm, the passion, to find the energy to keep going from one day to the next. Because every day there's going to be a new obstacle that's going to be put in front of you. And as a small company, so many things can actually just destroy the company. And so in that book, he talks about, having to fire friends. He talks about, how do you deal with a mutiny on your hands in your startup. He talks about, should you be, poaching employees from your other friends and their startups. And the short answer is no, you shouldn't be doing any of those things. But he really talks about just being a normal, everyday, average person, but being the CEO of these phenomenal companies with phenomenal people, and how to just kind of navigate the hard issues that you see on a day-to-day basis at a startup. And I know there's a lot of books out there, and a lot of people are like, you should read this book about the lean startup. Great book, by the way. You should read a book about crossing the chasm. It's a classic. Or Clay Christensen's another classic book, Innovator's Dilemma. All of those are extremely relevant books, and you should read them. Peter Thiel has a book about 0 to 1, very relevant. But all of those books I call Superman books, which is if you were a person that had superpowers, one of these things that are sort of extraordinary things that you're just sort of given to you by God, and you were good at one of the things that those books tell you to do, and you should just do that, and you'll have a great you'll have a great product and hopefully a great business from there. And so there's Superman books, right, or super person books, I should say, meaning there's some superpower that you can rely on. But for you and me and sort of the average everyday Joe, we don't really have superpowers. What we have is our resilience, our spirit, our energy, and our belief in ourselves, that, hey, this really has to happen, and we're the ones that are going to make it happen. And along the way, just so many obstacles are going to be put in front of you. And when you read this book by Ben Horowitz, you're going to see how these obstacles were just thrown at him, and he just, kind of like Batman, he didn't actually have superpowers. Like he developed them over time. He, became a ninja and, developed them over time. Ben Horowitz, developed those characteristics over time by going through these challenges. And so what I would say is, choose Batman or a bat person over Superman or a super person, because for the most of us, we're endowed with the only thing that we can get from ourselves, which is our own energy, our own passion, our own relentlessness that's necessary to build a great company.
Well, it looks like I have some reading to do and some more knowledge to gain. Mehul, thank you for taking the time today. Really appreciate you sharing your insights and your experience with us. To our viewers, thank you for tuning into this episode of WHU Inside Business, and we will see you next time. you.